So we've been on set for this high fashion magazine shoot, learning different techniques and really getting a glimpse at what we're going to be diving into in this course. Now I want to talk about one of the most important parts of creating a video, which is getting coverage. These techniques that we've touched on help you to get shots looking a certain way, but really getting multiple angles, shooting the same action in multiple different ways, and getting as many usable shots as possible is key to having enough ingredients to work with when you get to the post-production phase. So let's take a look at what the shots Luis has shot so far would look like in a montage. So all of these shots, what makes them unique is they're using the fundamentals from this course. For what we were shooting specifically, it's a short, entertaining, and exciting fashion magazine video. So if everything was on a tripod with no movement, it would be a pretty boring video. But what Luis decided to do was to use the clothing and the character as the main focal point, with dynamic lighting and an interesting background, and create excitement and action through the camera movement. Some of the shots here are very traditional, framed on the thirds, and some of the other shots are very non-traditional. That creates unique imagery that stands out. So the goal here, like I mentioned, is really to enhance what's in front of the camera. If you're shooting a talking shot on an iPhone with a tripod and it's just you standing in front of the camera, what kind of lighting and background can you use to make that more uniquely yours? If you're shooting a high-end fashion video, what kind of camera movement and framing can you use to make your average-looking shots really stand out? Even like choosing your background properly. It can be just as important as the subject or the main focus of your image, because it's also changing the way that we perceive what is on camera. Two different shots, same subject and outfit, same movement, different backgrounds, different experience. And when we're using these things, we're making sure to shoot multiple takes and multiple angles. This is gonna help you carve your story later on in the editing process. The more coverage you have, the more of a story you can tell, things that are important. And for this kind of example that Luis is doing is creating a lead-in shot with movement. You see, we're not really framing anything on the thirds. There's no special rules that we're following here, but we're moving the subject into frame. And this gives us kind of a cool intro into a shot, which really makes it stand out. It's also giving us more to work with in our edit. Little things like this really add more options for us later on and allow those extra little moments that you have recorded to create a more dynamic video. And now we're tracking with our subject. We're moving with our subject. And this is something I'm really excited to get into, which is effectively using camera movement. And that wraps it up for our mini on-set crash course experience. Again, I wanted this to be a really cool way to get the ball rolling, give you a real life look at some key techniques that you're gonna walk away with as you progress through this course. Okay, so that was pretty cool, right? We got to get on set and see a really complex, very detailed, condensed look into shooting different styles, using different types of equipment. And now I want to show you how to use this vintage camera. What I wanted to actually go back and add for you is to actually give you the exact opposite of a very complex, slightly maybe overwhelming set of learning lessons. I want to go and do something very simple and create a situation where you can easily see how all that information can be easily applied to different types of equipment that you might be shooting on. So where I wanted to start with first, or let me actually tell you where we're gonna go with this. So we're gonna start with shooting on the smartphone, shooting on these two types of more wide angle lenses where you can't really add any external lenses. This is a DJI Osmo with a built-in gimbal. This is a GoPro that's great for action. And then we're gonna move to the DSLR with a tripod, handheld, and then also with a 3-axis gimbal. And as I mentioned, we're gonna be doing the exact opposite of a very complex shoot with a subject in multiple locations and multiple outfits. What the subject or the object of interest is gonna be for this learning lesson is gonna be this very simple camera, okay? This vintage camera. We're not gonna be shooting with this. This is gonna be our subject. So I want you to know that this can also be replaced. As we're going through this session, you can replace what we're gonna learn in this session. You can replace this with a subject, with an interview that you're shooting, but all these principles are gonna be taken from what we just learned, applied to something very simple and straightforward, and you can use this information with any of these pieces of equipment. But we're gonna kind of walk through the pros and cons of each piece of equipment, and hopefully you're gonna walk away with some actionable takeaways that's gonna recap everything that we just learned on set. So let's get into it. All right, and so now that we've gotten that introduction out of the way, let's get right into this. So where I wanna start off first is shooting on the smartphone. Now I'm gonna set up a screen cap on this really quick. And of course, what we just saw and learned was a lot of complex shooting in a lot of different scenarios, but I really want to boil this down to the simplest form and really give you some good takeaways here. So what I'm going to do is open up my camera app on the phone. Now later in the course, we're going to be learning about different types of camera apps that you can use. They're going to give you all different types of resolutions that we're going to get to. But here I want to really focus on applying some of the things that we just went through. Now from the footage that we just saw, filmmaking and video creating is a lot about making what's in front of the camera look better than it looks in real life. We're using cinematography techniques to really upgrade the aesthetic of what we're shooting. Now you saw the example of the difference between something that is a tripod shot. So let me set this up. So you can see, as we're looking at our object of interest here, there's not a whole lot going on. And it's really called motion picture for a reason. So this is perfect for shooting an interview. This is perfect for shooting more long form content. Right now, my 1DX Mark II is sitting on a tripod because that's the ideal shooting style for this scenario. Now, there's not much of recording this on a tripod. It's not a very long form piece of content that I want to shoot. If I want to create something that's more short form and more interesting and has more energy, what I'm going to want to do is move the camera that I'm using slightly. And we're going to go really deep into this later in the course. But for now, I really want to get the wheels turning, the gears turning for you. And while you're going through this course, you're going to be able to plug in these understandings into the new skill set that you're going to gain. So like I mentioned, if I'm wanting to shoot an angle of this camera, you can do very simple movement, really slow and easy movement. What I call doing the yoga pose, okay? It doesn't have to be an elaborate, it doesn't have to be something very elaborate, but you can see that you want to brace your body and move with your whole body when you are moving your camera. Doesn't matter what you're shooting on. If I do this with just my hands, okay, you can see that there's not as much stabilization from the person who's holding the camera. So if you move with your whole body and really lock in the axis of the camera, so you got to imagine that there's up, front, down, left and right. These are the axes that the camera can move in. The more you lock that down, which is what a 3-axis gimbal does, but when you're shooting something that's a little bit more less produced. You still want it to look good, whether it's going on Instagram or YouTube or whatever it is, a video that you're sending to your family. You want to be proud of it. You want it to feel good. You want it to look good. So shooting something, adding a little bit of movement. I'll demonstrate this also before we move from the phone to something else. I'm going to demonstrate this quickly with a boomerang on Instagram. And if I hit record and do a slight push in, you can see it adds a cool dynamic look compared just to a tripod shot. Now, if I do what we just learned about more of that yoga pose style, you can see there's more of a dynamic feel. So this is something that you're picking up on. You're like, I like that video. I like that imagery. But I'm explaining to you why that looks good or feels good as a video. So we did the first shot, a little bit dynamic push in, and we did the second one. It was slightly more dynamic with the background shifting behind our object. Now, if we do something more complex with more energy, now that's adding a whole new spice and a whole new characteristic to what we're shooting. Nothing else changed. Same lighting, same object, same scenario, same person holding the camera, but choosing to add the right type of movement in a way that's balanced and stabilized is gonna give that really smooth, higher produced, silky, aesthetically pleasing image. So the last thing that I want to mention with that is deciding when to use the different lenses that come with your phone. Now, if I'm shooting this, there's a lot, it's a very busy looking framing, right? Or a very busy composition. There's stuff here, there's stuff there on the right, okay? You can kind of see the background. Now I can move closer and focus, and the background starts to fall off, and all we see is what we are interested in shooting. Now, if I use the more telephoto lens, now that's gonna make that effect even more dramatic, where what's in focus is very in focus, and what's behind what we're shooting is very blurry and out of focus. What that's also gonna do with the more telephoto lens is make the background change a lot more dramatic. So you can see the difference, right? Huge difference between this type of shot that's a more wide angle lens, there's a lot going on, and then this shot where we really push in, or we really zoom in to what we're shooting, and we're making that extremely important, right? It's creating a much more cinematic image because the eye is going straight into the frame. What's in focus, what's important, is being enhanced by using a more telephoto lens. So with a little bit of a yoga pose and using the right lens choice for your shooting situation, you're gonna start getting a lot better looking imagery just with those little tips, okay? So now you should have a pretty good understanding of better using your smartphone. Now what I wanna do is move to these more type of action cameras, for lack of a better word, really cameras that you can't change the lenses, and these cameras are more designed for pointing in the direction that you want to shoot and capturing what's in front of it without it being very cinematic, because these types of cameras, GoPros and more of these pocket cameras, are very wide angle, and we're gonna take a look and see what that looks like and see when it's beneficial to use them and really kind of the pros and cons. So let's first start here with the GoPro. So as you can see, super wide angle lens. I believe it's a 13 to 14 millimeter focal length, which we are gonna dive into lenses and focal length later in the course, very in detail, so don't worry. But as you can see, if I get close to this, it kind of looks funky, right? It's warped. It doesn't look very cinematic. If I get far away, then the thing I'm trying to shoot just kind of looks really not so great. So we were actually able to get more of a better looking image actually from our phone. That's because you really want to be using this for what it's built for, which is action, sports, skiing, like all the cutaway shots that I'm showing you right now, outdoors type of stuff, in the sun, with a lot of movement and a lot of excitement. So you don't want to be shooting interviews with this. You don't want to be really vlogging with this. You don't want to be creating a whole lot of content with something like this unless you are working in the action sports, adventure type of world. But the same principles do apply, that if I want to shoot something and make it look average, I'm going to set it up and hit record, and that's what it's going to look like. Now, if I want it to be slightly more dynamic, I can hold the camera, lock it into position so there's not a lot of shakiness, and I can slowly move my whole body forward. Okay? If I want things to be more dynamic, I'm gonna use the same technique, but I'm going to create more movement at a higher speed. So now let's move to a similar camera in the same type of more outdoorsy action wide angle genre. This is the DJI Osmo. And the cool thing about this kind of camera is it has a built-in gimbal. So it's very wide angle like the GoPro, but it's going to stabilize and it's going to take out all the jittery shaking that other cameras will have. So the only takeaway that I really want to give you with this is this type of camera is really good for getting long shots with a lot of movement, okay? The reason being is that you can move and walk and get far or close to what you're shooting, and this is gonna take away all of the jitteriness and all of the motion changes that are happening on that 3-axis up, down, left, right, side to side that we talked about. So the pros to this is that it's gonna really do that for you. It's gonna stabilize a lot of your shots. The cons are that it's not gonna be able to give you a shallow depth of field, but it's great for if you're shooting on the run and gun style and you're wanting to capture a lot of content quickly. Like I could very easily shoot this, okay? Go here, shoot this. Go here, shoot this. Go here and shoot this. Okay, and shoot that. So I was able to really knock out all those shots without having to set up, do things, change the exposure, really worry about focus too much. This is great for running and gunning and really capturing a lot of content quickly without putting a lot of cinematography, brain power thinking into it, but it's gonna allow for you to really knock out a lot of shots in a short period of time. Perfect, so we made it through shooting with the smartphone, shooting on these more action-oriented cameras, and how we can really use, in a simplistic way, all the complex things that we saw on set, how we can use that with the equipment that you might be using. Now what we're gonna do is learn how to shoot with this right here. So what you're gonna do is go to the store, buy some Kodak film, put it in here, twist this up. No, okay, no. We're gonna be, we're gonna move to the DSLR and more mirrorless style camera. So same things are gonna be applying here. The fundamentals are gonna really work in the same way. If we're shooting long form content, this is where a tripod is perfect. But I wanna give a few hacks and tips here. So if we have our tripod set up, yes, and always take your lens cap off. You're gonna wanna do this before shooting. It's gonna make your footage just look a lot better, and your audience is gonna definitely enjoy that a lot more. Oh boy. Okay, so we're shooting at 16 millimeters, and I'm not gonna go into settings, exposure, ISO, shutter speed. That's in the next chapter. But as you can see, you can get the vibe that you're feeling from this tripod shot. Now, the cool little hack that I wanted to get into is this is perfect for a static scene, a static scenario. What you can do is you can either buy a monopod like this, which is basically a tripod with one leg, meaning mono, tripod, monopod. And this is really great for quickly knocking out shots. And you can actually add a little bit of movement. You can easily put it here, get a different shot, and you don't have to set up the legs and set up the height on 3 different legs. So this is an item that I would really recommend for run and gun filmmakers. You can also kind of use it as a kind of gimbal, but the hack, the tip that I wanted to show you, because that's a $150 Manfrotto tripod. Not everyone has that type of money to spend. What you can do is use the tripod that you have and collapse the legs together, and then use it as a monopod or use it as an almost like a gimbal. So I can easily put the legs together, shoot right there, and then move, shoot right there. I can go and I can add a little bit of movement. And it's gonna take away a lot of shake on the camera, because if I'm holding it with my hands, which you may be shooting a lot of your footage handheld for simplicity's sake, maybe you haven't purchased a gimbal yet, that's totally fine. You can shoot footage handheld, but just know you're gonna have a lot of shakiness, side to side, up and down, and tilting. Now, when you add something like a monopod, it's gonna take away all those different types of movement, and you're gonna be able to very easily do your yoga poses. So you're not even gonna have to go to a yoga studio. You just pick up your camera and your monopod, boom, you got your yoga in for the day, okay? So that's just a cool little hack that I personally use a lot, all the time. It really gets you in and out of a lot of scenarios and takes away that shakiness. And I wanted to mention, I'm not sure if I've mentioned it already, shakiness in your footage is great for making your scene more chaotic, or that feels really, really unrefined and raw and doesn't feel professional. A lot of movies like Bourne Identity and more, I guess, action, thriller, car chase type movies, they use that as a hack to actually make the audience feel like there's a lot of chaotic craziness going on. Most of the time though, you don't want that. Most of the time you want to create footage that feels smooth and crisp and more cinematic. So a lot of the times too, you're probably going to be shooting handheld. So biggest thing, no matter what you're shooting on, use your yoga pose, use something like a monopod, and really combine those things with a little bit of movement. And that's really going to help your footage right out of the gate before we get into this more complex stuff. And now that should really give you some clarity and actionable takeaways, seeing both the complex side of shooting on set and then something very simple and very straightforward regardless of what you're shooting on. And now what I want you to do is really apply these techniques that we learned in this entire chapter. So grab whatever you're shooting with, whether that's a smartphone, a DSLR, a mirrorless camera, and I want you to shoot a very, very simple piece of content, whether that's an Instagram story, a YouTube video, or just one single shot. And I want you to choose an object, a person, or an idea, or anything you're curious about shooting really, and use some of the tools below that we've gone over. So with the equipment that you're using, knowing the pros and cons that you do now, set up what you're gonna shoot and use the camera to the best of its ability. You really wanna focus on maximizing the pros of your piece of equipment and really minimizing the cons or the downsides of it. Once you've gotten clear on that, use your yoga pose, right? Use your subtle movement to create a little bit more of a dynamic looking image. And I want you to experiment with different types of angles, different types of ways of shooting to really find your shooting style. And then I want you to export that piece of content and share your footage in the Q&A section and mention what you learned during that process of integrating and using the information that we went over to shoot this kind of warm-up practice exercise before going more into detail on these topics later in the course. I'm looking forward to seeing the piece of content that you come up with, and I will see you in the next chapter.